The Detroit Tigers are back for year 2. We start this season with a bit of spring training. That's all we're going to focus on today. And I have 10 players in mind for us to get some highlights for. And before we reveal who those players are, I did make one change between last episode and now to the 40-man roster for spring training. And that change was to call up Jackson Jobe to the majors for this next month prior to the season opening, and I put Navigado on waivers to hopefully still keep him down in AAA for the time being. But I think that Jobe has played extremely well in the years that he has been in our system, and I think he deserves at least some kind of a role in spring training. So I do have him as our top long relief pitcher, so we should get plenty of action for him at some point. But other players that I want to focus on today are new signing Luis Severino, new signing Matt Chapman, new signing Tyler Mahle, new signing Ahmed Rosario. And otherwise, we are going to focus on Pedro Leon, Jace Young, Matt Mervis, Spencer Torkelson, and Dylan Dingler. Those are the guys that I want to focus on for today. I think we have a pretty good idea of the kind of players that Riley Green is, the kind of player that Akil Baddoo is, Whistler, Carpenter, those kinds of guys. So I want to focus on guys that we don't know a lot about, at least in the context of being on our team, or guys that we are, possibly looking for more from, like for example Dylan Dingler and Spencer Torkelson. Those are guys that I want to see a bit more from this season. And we're going to start by talking about Luis Severino, who, if you guys don't know from last episode, we did bring him in on a 5-year, $75 million contract. So he'll be getting about 15 M's per season. And before this year, he played for the Yankees for his entire career since 2015, which was his debut season. But it's his first time not in New York, and he was a fantastic pitcher for them, which is why I wanted to go and get somebody like him. Last year, he had 32 starts, went 13-7, had a ERA around 2.6, 2.65, somewhere around there, and had 23 quality starts out of those 32 starts. So he was amazing. He had a 4.5 WAR, a K per 9 just below 8, walk per 9 was around 2.4, home run per 9 was below 1, which is fantastic, and his FIP was really good as well, around 3.39. So you kind of knew what you would get with him coming in. He's got 4 different pitches: a 4-seam fastball, a 2-seamer, a circle changeup, a slider, and a cutter. So he's got a nice mixed bag of different kinds of pitches. And I also jumped in to get a couple of highlights for some batters here, and Matt Chapman had a single in his first spring training plate appearance, so that was really good. And next up is Matt Vierling behind him. So with no outs here in the second, he gets a flare to drop down as a fair ball, which will be extra bases as Chapman strolls into third, and Vierling has a nice double right there. Scope next up, grounds it to shortstop, but that will allow Chapman to score, and Detroit gets on the board first. But back to Severino. He was absolutely fantastic in spring training. He was awesome. 5 wins, no losses, pitched 39 full innings, had 35 strikeouts, which led the team, and an ERA of 1.15. His whip was at 1.03. He was absolutely just amazing. He had pretty much no issues, only 5 earned runs through those 39 innings. He was just, you just can't say enough. He had a K per 9 above 8, a WAR of 1.2 in spring training, which is pretty ridiculous in my opinion. FIP at 2.56, which I just have not seen hardly at all in my time playing this game and playing with this franchise. And this game right here was the very first game of spring training. So as our ace, he of course got the start. And yeah, he pitched well, as you might expect from an ace kind of a player. And he does have some really good stamina, around 79 to 80 stamina. Hit per 9 is his highest attribute aside from velocity and break, which are both at 94 and 95. And he's got K per 9, walk per 9 in a similar area at like around 70, home run per 9 at 63. But he's really kept that home run per 9, despite, not being his best attribute. He has done a good job of not allowing many home runs. He's also got some good pitching clutch. He has fine control, and he can get you to swing at breaking balls. He can get you to miss on fastballs. He can use any kind of a pitch that he has in his repertoire to retire batters. So I'm excited to see what he can do on a lineup, especially with Tarek Skubal and D-Rod coming off some really promising seasons last time out, especially in the latter half of the season. So here in the 6th, Alec Boehm fouling off the full count pitch, and he eventually draws the walk. But Detroit leads 2-0 here in the 6th. 2 runners on. Harper grounds into a double play, and that is going to be 4-6-3. Runner does get to third. Count goes full for Hoskins, and he strikes out to end the inning. So 6 full innings here for Severino. No runs allowed. And we go back to Matt Chapman, who torques one to center field. That one is absolutely smoked. The first spring training game for Matt Chapman here in a Tigers uniform, and he just put one 441 feet. Showing off the power in his first ever appearance. Ron Ferguson, our new manager, loves it, and I do too. If he can do that for us this year, that would be an absolutely just huge boost for the offense, because we did not have a guy besides Kerry Carpenter who could do this for us last year. And even then, he wasn't that great of a power hitter, to be completely honest. But we go in the 7th where Severino stays in, and Dermis Garcia leads off the inning with a double. Riley Green gets to it, but a stand-up extra base hit for Garcia. Next up is Rafael Marchand as he grounds it, and Severino taps on the bag after a toss from Spencer Torkelson. So a runner on third. Brandon Lau at the plate, and he's caught on strikes looking. A slider on the outer edge got him. That was his 4th strikeout of the day, and he gets number 5 here against Brandon Marsh. 3 hits for Philadelphia. No runs allowed, and one more highlight here is going to be for Kevin Plawecki, sending one to the left center gap to lead off, or not to lead off the inning, but with 2 outs in the inning here in the 7th. And he has a stand-up double for himself. Tigers would go on to win this game 3-0 behind a scoreless pitching performance from Luis Severino and Tarek Skubal, who came in for the last couple of innings. Severino shows off what he can do in his first appearance for us in spring training, putting together 7 scoreless innings, allowing 3 hits and 4 walks and striking out 5. Now we're going to talk about another big signing that we made during this past off-season. Ahmed Rosario played in Cleveland for 3 years, so he is a division rival, or he at least was, but now he's with us over here in Detroit. But in 3 years in Cleveland, he batted over 280 in his first 2 years there, and then he is coming off a year where he batted only 253, so there was a bit of a dip there in his average. His slugging kind of stayed the same, just above 400, so he kept that pretty consistent, and he had an on-base plus slugging of just below 700, where it was a bit above 700 in the previous couple of seasons prior to that. But I feel like this could be a really good signing for us. He's got plenty of quirks. We signed him to a pretty long contract for 5 years. He's going to make about $6.7 million per season, and he does have a player option for the 5th year. So after the first 4, if we don't end up trading him or whatever happens, he could opt out for potential more money or for another deal somewhere else. Who knows? But got a long while until we get there. And he's a guy that could play shortstop and then can play any spot out in the outfield, but he cannot play second, third, or first. So we won't be seeing him in pretty much any other spot besides shortstop, most likely. I don't think we need to have him play in the outfield because we have plenty of guys that can already do that. But he's got a couple of quirks. He's got first pitch hitter, which means that he's just good at hitting off the first pitch of any at-bat. He's got situational hitter, which means that he's good at driving in runners from third with less than 2 outs. And he's got bad ball hitter as well, where he excels at hitting pitches outside of the strike zone. But to be completely honest, he did not have a good spring training. He actually had a pretty rough go of it. He batted only .210, had the 4th most at-bats on the team, so plenty of opportunities for him to rebound and pick things up, but he never really did. He only had 13 hits in those 62 at-bats, only 4 RBIs, had 1 stolen base, slugging at just .242, which is very low. Just not what we're used to according to what he's done in the past, but it is just spring training. It's not even really a full month on the schedule, so I guess we'll see if this continues to start the actual season, because he is going to be on the roster, so hopefully he can pick things up and will not be off to a slow start. But I really hope that he can do better once we actually start the year. We're going to turn our focus now to Tyler Mahle, who we also signed to a 5-year deal during the offseason. And looking back, it might be difficult for me to justify signing him to a deal that was bigger than what we gave Luis Severino, who's going to be our ace. He is not as good of a pitcher. He has less pitches in his pitching repertoire. His stats aren't as good. His overall is not as good. Honestly, not sure what I was thinking giving him as big of a deal as we gave him. But, I mean, he took it because it was probably by far the biggest one. It was 5 years, $77.5 million. So he's making $500K more per year than our ace is. And he's coming off 1 year in Minnesota, who is also in our division, where he had a WAR of 3.4, which he's had a WAR above 2 for 3 straight years, which is a very good sign. He's got similar K per 9 numbers from last year as to Severino. Walk per 9 is a bit higher at around 3.36, but home run per 9, like Severino, is very good, below 1. Actually, it's below 0.9. His FIT was at 3.8, which I think anything below 4 is pretty solid. So if you're below that, then you're having a pretty decent season. And he had 22 quality starts and 33 total starts across the season. So having 22 quality starts is very impressive for 2/3 of your starts. That's pretty damn good, because a quality start, essentially, as far as I know, is pretty much qualified as 6 total innings pitched and allowing 3 earned runs or less. So doing that 22 times in 1 year is pretty good, which is why I brought him in. And he did have a whip of 1.28 and has been kind of floating around there or a bit lower than that for the past 3 to 4 seasons. So I'm expecting that number to be around the 1.2s. ERA was at 3.59, which was down from the year before that. In fact, it was his best ERA since he had that same exact number back in 2020. He also had plenty of strikeouts with 170. Gave up a total of 20 home runs, 76 walks, and just over 200 total innings pitched. But overall, 15 wins, 8 losses. So I'm expecting him to be responsible for several wins this year, just like I am for Severino. But here against Pittsburgh in this spring training game, they had his number the entire time that he was out there. He pretty much allowed 1 run per inning, which, if you can do any math at all, that's a 9 ERA, which obviously is horrible. Now, we can't be having that from one of our new 5-year contract starters. So I definitely want to expect him to not have as bad of a spring training as he did. I'll go over his stats right now. He had 1 win, 3 losses, pitched just over 23 innings, almost got through full 24. Gave up 11 walks, 15 strikeouts, ERA of 8.37. So obviously that's not good. Had a whip over 2.1. And yeah, no quality starts. Not really going to expect that from a spring training stat line perspective. But Severino had one. Molly did not. And I just really hope that this was just like a warm-up phase, I guess, for him. Because if this is how he plays during the regular season, then we might have to look to somebody else to be a starting pitcher. But that would be the end of his day here. Joey Wentz came in to wrap things up for us. The Tigers would eventually get the win, which is always nice to see. And Wentz, no earned runs through 4.1. He had a good day. It's time to talk about one of our premier players in the organization in terms of our prospects, Spencer Torkelson, who really doesn't even qualify as a prospect anymore because he's played nearly 2 full years in the majors, only has 1.091 years of service, but has played over 300, or not games, but has had over 300 at-bats in each of the last 2 seasons up in the major leagues. And as we well know, after talking about him previously in the past season, he really just hasn't been good when he's been called up. And his rookie year, he batted .203, had a slugging below .320, and last year, very similar numbers. He had pretty much the same number of at-bats. The average was even lower at 200 on the dot. Slugging was a bit higher at 3.58, but the on-base percentage was lower at 2.53, which was 3% lower than the previous season. So to see him have a couple of numbers go down is concerning, even after we saw his overall go up. And of course, he still does have that A potential, so there is always the chance that he will find his stride and use that to potentially actually take a hold of his ceiling. But right now, his potential is just that. It's just potential. And I really haven't seen many signs of life for him in terms of turning things around. And spring training was kind of more of the same. In fact, it was worse. In spring training, he had 42 at-bats, and he batted .119. That was his average. His slugging was at .190, on-base percentage of .140, OPS of .330, 14 strikeouts, and he only had 5 hits. So you're seeing that nothing is panning out for him. 1 walk as well versus those 14 strikeouts. I really am finding it hard to justify him being our starting first baseman. Matt Chapman hit 2 home runs in this game, which was also a win for Severino. He allowed 3 runs through 4 innings pitched, gave up 8 hits, had 4 strikeouts and only 1 walk. So, got the win, but definitely not as good of a day as his first. But back to Torque, I'm not going to send him down to AAA to start the year. He will start on the active roster for sure. And we are going to talk about his only other competition at first base, Matt Mervis, after we watch the rest of the highlights for Torkelson here. Most of them aren't even really highlights. They're just clips from some spring training that I played with him. But yeah, I'm just not sure what's wrong with Torque besides him just not being able to hit the ball. Granted, I haven't helped him out when I've been playing as him. But to be honest, when I haven't been controlling him, he's been as bad, if not worse, than when I've been controlling him. And with 51 contact for lefties and 51 contact for righties as well, like, those aren't bad. Those aren't, major league numbers or anything. But there are plenty of guys on the roster in spring training who outperformed him with either similar or even worse contact ratings, and they had a much better average. Granted, this is a small sample size, as it is for every player in spring training. But to see him not show anything on the offensive end to start what could be his 3rd major league season is just disappointing. Especially when he has power at 58 for righties and 50 for lefties. And he's got, decent plate vision at 60. So I just wish that I could actually see that happen when he's playing, but I just don't. And when I've made good contact with pitches, which has been, a rare sight when I'm batting with him, but when I have, he's done nothing with them. In fact, he almost always rolls over them, or he's underneath them, where he just grounds it right to first base or to short or second or wherever else. And really, entirely, I think Matt and Mervis is probably going to get most of the first base starts to begin the season. So we're going to talk about him in just a moment as Tork fouls off this fastball. Another one of those where it's in a good spot to hit. It was a decent swing, but just couldn't do anything with it, and that was it for him. So now we're going to talk about Matt Mervis, who is the competition for Torkelson at first base. And most of his highlights did come in the first couple of weeks, so the average that you're seeing on your screen right now is not accurate to what he finished with, but I will go over those stats with you real quick. He was a Rule 5 draft pickup for us. He was drafted by us in the first round of that draft, which means that he's going to be on the active roster for the entire year, unless we decide to option him back to his previous club. Those are the only options that we have with him. So if somehow Tork steps up and outperforms Mervis by a lot, and Mervis is playing terribly, then we probably will let Mervis go back to the Cubs. But until further notice, I think Mervis has earned a spot as the full-time starter at first base, or at least a part-time starter. You're seeing him strike out here, but in spring training, he did have a much better average than Torkelson did. It wasn't great, but it was better than Tork at 232. He had more at-bats because Tork played most of the first half of spring training, and then I saw that he was playing poorly, and I was like, I got to give Matt Mervis a shot here. He hasn't gotten many opportunities off of the bench or out of the dugout, so I figured why not give him some full-time spring training reps, and it worked out for him. With a 232 average, had 13 hits, 9 RBIs, slugging at around 339. On-base percentage was pretty low at 267, so that's definitely concerning because he was not a guy that was going to draw many walks. He had 3 walks and 22 strikeouts, which actually, if I recall correctly, it did lead the spring training team in strikeouts. So having like the sixth most amount of at-bats and the most strikeouts, that's not a good sign. So still not sure of who really is going to be the future at first base, but we at least have somebody who is better than Torkelson, and that's all we can really ask for right now. So we'll see what he can do. He does have better contact attributes than Tork does, with 53 contact righty and 60 contact lefty, so you would kind of expect him to have a better average than Torkelson. He also has better power as well, with 55 against righties, which is around where Tork is, but much better power against lefties at 61. So we're going to see if he can provide some more power, give us a couple of extra base hits, maybe some home runs. But the 40 plate vision is probably why he had so many strikeouts and why he led the team, because 40 plate vision is not very good. Torkelson has 60, and he's not even that good of a player. So you're seeing that there's a pretty big gap there. And you know, every player has their strengths, their weaknesses, so I'm not really shocked by it. But here in the first inning of this game, Mervis does get an extra base hit, and the Tigers really completely obliterated Aaron Nola in the first inning. We already have 4 runs on the board right here, as Mervis just brought home 2 more. So he's at second. We got a runner on third, as Yasmani Grandal flares one into left field, and Mervis is waved around, and he will slide across home plate as the Tigers tack on 2 more. 6 runs here in the first inning. And Yasmani Grandal was another guy who played really well in spring training. And I do think that Grandal is going to be the full-time catcher. And then we'll have every couple of games maybe have Tom Murphy or Kevin Plawecki step in if Grandal gets tired, or else there's, you know, a good matchup for one of those guys. But I am happy so far with the Grandal signing, and I am happy with how Mervis did in spring training overall. It was probably around what I would expect from him, and as a Rule 5 draft pick, you don't expect him to be a top-of-the-line starter anyways. So, yeah, we'll see what he can do. He's got better fielding attributes than Torkelson does, with an arm of 68, fielding at 66, reaction at 61. He's not as fast as Torkelson is, so there obviously are some good things about Torque that Mervis just does not have. But obviously you take the strengths that he does have over his weaknesses, because right now he's going to be better than the other first base option. As Carlson grounds out and Mervis steps on the bag to end the inning. We go to the 7th, where Mervis leads off against Genesis Cabrera. There's ball 1 low. Next pitch swung on, curveball just on the outer edge of the plate. And now one in there, and it's strike 3 for Mervis. And that's all we'll get for him. But I definitely was not underwhelmed by what he did. Now we're going to talk about Dylan Dingler, who is a guy who played in Double-A mostly last year. I think we called him up towards the end of the season to play in Triple-A, but I think he will start the year in Triple-A. He definitely won't start in the majors because we have Tom Murphy, Plawecki, and Grandal, so there's not really a space or a spot for him to be a catcher, because having 4 catchers is way too much. Having 3 is even a bit of a stretch, but I think that'll work out for us anyways, as he lines one down the left field line, and he's going to head to second, trying to get aggressive here, but he's thrown out. That will count as a single, though, but Dingler was drafted a couple years back, and at first he was kind of having a slow start in spring training through the first couple of games, which I did give him a lot of the reps there, but then he did slowly pick things up, and he ended up averaging 250 during spring training, which is better than I thought he would. I thought he'd be around Mervis' numbers at like 230 or 220, but he wasn't. He actually surprised me, which is pretty good. He had 40 at-bats, so similar to what Torkelson did. He had 10 hits, 7 RBIs. On base was in the mid-330s. Slugging was around there as well. Had 5 walks to 12 strikeouts, so definitely a better ratio than some players, but still definitely not good. I want it to be better than that. So we'll see what we'll see what happens going forward. But I do think that he'll be the main catcher in AAA to start year 2, and hopefully he could be the future at catcher. We also did sign Alonzo Gold. If you guys recall, we almost drafted him in the draft during the season in year 1, but ended up going a different direction because his overall was going to be so low. But he does have 40 overall A potential, and he's going to be starting in single 8 ball. So we have him. We've got Dylan Dingler, those 2 guys to look forward to at catcher for the most part. There are a couple other players, obviously, but I'm focusing on the guys that we like, who are the younger guys who have the most promise, and Dingler is one of them. And Dingler should provide pretty much equal batting against both lefties and righties, similar to what Mervis does. He has very similar attributes across the board for batting, with 44 contact against righties, 46 against lefties, and then power in the high 40s or 50 for both righties and lefties. So you would expect him to eventually be a full-time starter if he picks things up in AAA, because he can, at least based on the attributes, play well against both kinds of pitchers equally. So we'll see what he can do. He's got plate vision at 47, which again is not very high, so that's kind of why he has as many strikeouts as he does. Fielding is in a decent spot. His arm's not, I think, where you want it to be for a catcher at 67, and his reaction time definitely needs work if he's going to be throwing anybody out from behind home plate. He only has 58 reaction time, which really is not too good for one of the guys who is responsible for throwing people out on base. So hopefully in AAA this year we see him get a bunch of those attributes going up, and I really expect him to be one of our better AAA players. So we'll see what he does as he grounds another one down the third base line, and he will reach once again. So Pedro Leon next up, lines out to short. Garrett Cole on the mound today in the spring training game as Akil Baddoo grounds it to second. That's going to be a fielder's choice as Baddoo is safe at first. We go bottom 7. Dingler watches ball 1 go by with Johnny Brito now on the mound. Count goes 2-0. Now it's 3-0. Nice side to stay ahead. But then he cranks one on a 3-1 count, and it's caught in center field for the first out of the inning. We go bottom 9 for his next at bat, facing Michael King out in front of the slider. Could have done some damage with that one if he makes contact. And now the low sinker. And then he's back out in front of the slider. And that's all we get for Dylan Dingler. Now it's time to talk about Jackson Jobe, who is one of my favorite prospects in the entire farm system. I wanted to give him at least one start here in spring training, so I did. I took out Tyler Mahle for one start, and I put in Jobe instead, who was fully rested for it, because he wasn't getting many reps as a reliever. So this right here is pretty much the only action that we have for Jobe in spring training. He wasn't going to make the Major League roster anyways to start the year, but I think it was worthwhile to get at least a look at him in a start and see what he can do against a couple of Major League batters. One game is not enough to know, but if he can do well in one game, then that is at least something positive. And I know last year I said that I was probably going to start him in AA for the first month and then call him up to AAA if he played well. But I think instead, I might just start him in AAA instead because of how he played in spring training. Granted, again, only had 9 total innings worth of action here. They did not all come in this game, obviously, because it's spring training, but he had 9 total innings pitched, allowed 4 walks, had 10 strikeouts across those 9 innings, so that's a really good number to have, and gave up only 1 run. So that is that's a good sign. Granted, that's pretty much 1 full game of action. Not a lot to go off of. He had a whip of 1.33. He appeared in 5 games aside from the start and pitched, I think, 1 inning per those 4 other games. And he does get the credit for this win. But overall, I think he pitched really well in this game. So let's see how he does. Let's just keep on watching this game as he does get Michael Harris to look at strike 3 to end the 3rd. And last year in AA and the year before that, he was very good. So I think it makes sense for him to make that move up to AAA to start the second year with us in this franchise. And hopefully, maybe at some point, maybe either later this year or next year, he could be called up to the majors for a much more important role in the organization. I think that he definitely has the ability to get there as he gets Austin Riley to strike out. We go bottom 5. Matt Olson swings through the fastball on the inside of the plate. And he's down. Ozuna out in front of the fastball. Swinging through the slider now. Can't make contact with anything. But eventually he is walked by Jobe. He did walk a couple of batters here in this game. But you will come to expect that, especially from guys who are still trying to figure out their control like he is. But in terms of what he can do as a pitcher, well, he's got pretty good stamina in the mid-70s. He's got a hit per 9 and K per 9 in the high 50s. Home run per 9 as well, with walk per 9 in the low 50s. So all those are in a pretty similar area, which is what you look for because he's a very well-rounded pitcher. And this would be it for him, and Severino came in to close the game out. Jobe gets player of the game, allowing no runs through 5 innings pitched, had 2 hits, 3 walks, and 5 strikeouts, and Severino got the save in this 1-0 victory. Now we're going to move on to Pedro Leon, who is one of my favorite up-and-coming players in the entire team because of what he did last year to end the season. If you don't recall, we called him up in September for the September call-ups to fill out the rest of the active roster once we had 2 extra roster spots. He was called up with Dylan Dingler after we had acquired him in a trade for Michael Lorenzen. It was just a 1-for-1 swap, and ever since we got him, he has been lights out at the plate, hitting very well, and he ended up batting last year, like I think it was 280 from the plate in terms of his average, and he had a couple of home runs. We saw his first ever Major League home run in one of his first couple of games, and he did the exact same thing in spring training. Pretty much the identical numbers, the same play style, the amount of consistency that he gave us last year as well, and he is definitively parts of the roster to start the season for sure. He had a good spring training. He batted .280, and you can't really ask for much more from a guy who you didn't really know a lot about when you traded for him. So at the very least, that was really good. He did have the most at-bats out of anybody during spring training because I just wanted to see what he could do if he could keep things up from what he did to end our first year in Detroit. And he sure as hell did. He had 3 home runs, 10 RBIs, 21 total hits, and he slugged over 500 in spring training, which I did not expect from anybody on this team, except for maybe Matt Chapman, but Leon really surprised me yet again because he had several triples, he had several doubles. He only had a couple of double plays, only 2 in 73 at-bats, so that's pretty good how he didn't have a lot of those because he is a guy who makes plenty of contact, but he somehow is doing all of this with only 35 vision. 35 vision, and then he's got low to mid-50s contact against both lefties and righties, but he's doing what Tor can't. He's got very similar ratings as to him and Matt Mervis, and he's outperforming both guys, and I just think it's awesome. I'm so glad that we made that trade for him last year at the deadline because it's paid off, and he's also got speed, he's got good footing, he has a great arm with 77, and these will all only hopefully get better as he matures and grows and gets older. And he definitely will be on the roster, as I already said, and I think he'll get full-time starting duty in right field to pretty much be that full-time Austin Meadows replacement with maybe a better average because Meadows averaged .253 last year and Leon outperformed him when he was in there. So I really think that he can be one of our better batters on the team as Matt Mervis gets Leon to third base with that hit to keep this game alive here in the 9th. That'll bring up Dylan Dingler, who we obviously already talked about. He will rip this one to left field for a single, and Leon will cross home plate to close the gap to 1. With 2 outs, last man up as Akil would do, but he lines it to first to end the game, and the Baltimore Orioles do take this game 3-2. But Leon, once again, is a very fun player to play with because even if you're not having a good swing or a perfect swing, he's still going to get singles, he's still going to get extra base hits, and he's got the base running speed to turn singles into doubles or triples and things along those lines. He also has a bit of power on him, 54 power against lefties, 49 against righties, so he's a really good all-around player, and I think he only has room to go up from here, as you're seeing another extra base hit for him here in this next game against the Red Sox with Detroit up by a lot. Here's a second look. It was a perfect timing swing too, so that also helps out. A couple yards shy of leaving the park. Jace Young, who we'll talk about in just a moment, grounds out the first, and that'll end the inning here in the 3rd. We go top of the 4th as Randy Arozarena, the former Tampa Bay Ray, hits his first home run of spring training, a 3-run blast to get the Red Sox on the board. And that one comes against Erod, who had a great just send-off to last season, a great last couple of months. Leon underneath this fastball, not enough contact there into shallow right, and he's out. Boston closes the gap to 3 here as we go to the 7th, and Leon can't do anything with a really nice slider to do some damage with. We go to the 9th inning, and Christian Arroyo skies it, and that is our final play for Leon here in spring training. Now let's talk about Jace Young, one of the Tigers' top draft picks 2 years ago before we took over. How is he doing? Well, at this point, he was off to a really poor start in spring training, batting only 67. But here, the catcher is there, but I guess the sun blocked his eyes and he can't make the grab. But then, same thing, we pop it out, and the third baseman will this time corral it for the out. Bryce Harper at the plate. Full count, grounded, second base, and Young is there to make the throw. But Young, I think, will also, like Dingler, start the year in AAA. Will hopefully be the main guy at second for the Mud Hens. And overall in spring training, here is what he did. He batted 167, so definitely not major league material in terms of those metrics. So only 6 hits and 36 at-bats. Had a OBP of 231, slugging below 230, OPS below 500, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, had 2 doubles, and really just cannot get going at the plate, unfortunately. But Miles Mikolas, nice pitch. This one almost leaves the yard, but just a couple feet shy. Showing off some of the power there. He definitely does have more power than some guys do right now, with 55 power against righties and 41 against lefties. He is a much better righty hitter, but can still do some damage against lefties too. But again, he will start the year in AAA, I think, but is still one of the top prospects in the entire organization. He's not a great fielder. We don't really have many guys who are great fielders. We have a lot of guys who are just average or slightly above average, and he falls in line with that stereotype. As Riley Green flares it to third base, and he is out to end the third. In the fifth, there's ball 1 from Mikolas, and then a grounder over to second base. Could have done more with that one. You're seeing what he needs to work on here. He makes plenty of contact, but for the most part does not make the most of it. His plate vision is 51, so at this point, trying to get that up, trying to get contact up, especially against lefties, is probably the key to getting him into a better spot to be a future major league player. As that is Parker Meadows looking at strike 3. Gleyber Torres pops it out to second base, and Young comes over. He gets under it to make the grab for out number 2 here in the second for another start for Luis Severino. He is facing Carlos Rodon, and I think this was the game where Young had the most success, was against Rodon. He had that single earlier, as we saw. Now he gets another one belted into right field. Can that one get down? Yes, it can for extras, and he will stroll into second for a stand-up double here in the third. So 1 out. Next batter up is Matt Chapman, who was fantastic in spring training. We'll talk about him and show some of his highlights aside from that home run that we saw. As Parker Meadows flares one to left field, and that'll get Young to slide across home plate to get the Tigers on the board first against the Yankees. And all of my commentary right now is coming at a point where we have 1 game left in spring training, because I'm not really sure when the spring training stats disappear, but we're currently 13-13 with 1 game left. So around 500 or at 500, we're going to be around there regardless if you win or lose the last spring training game. But we're going to turn our heads to Matt Chapman now, as he is facing Drew Rasmussen for the Rays, and Chapman strikes out quickly. We brought him in on a 5-year, $50 million contract, which might be a bit too much for a guy who's 30 years old, but I mean, he's a really good batter. And he's got 3 quirks as well. He's got home body, which means he's just better playing at home. He's unfazed, which means that he is better when he's hitting with 2 strikes. And he's better when the team is behind. He's got the rally monkey quirk. He's got a couple of good ones that can be really useful for this team, because we're probably going to be behind plenty of times this year, because we're still not at a spot, I think, where we're going to be playoff contenders. Definitely not yet. We are putting the pieces together for it, but I don't think we have the roster for it yet, but we're getting there. And Matt Chapman is one of those steps to get to that point. And he's coming off 2 years in Toronto where he had 23 or more home runs in each of those 2 seasons. Had plenty of strikeouts, in fact, more strikeouts than hits, but to be honest, I don't even care because of the home runs. He slugged over 420 in both of those last 2 seasons, and he just has a whole lot of power to work with. He can only play third and short, but again, he's going to be a full-time third baseman for us And we have guys at short already like Jose Iglesias and Ahmed Rosario. So those guys will probably share some playing time there. And Iglesias will probably play some DH2 for us. But to Chapman, he was fantastic in spring training, man. I thought he would be good. I didn't think he would be this good. He batted .341, had an OBP of 400, slugged over 650, which is just absurd. He had 4 home runs, 9 RBIs, and just 41 at-bats. And for reference, Kerry Carpenter had 4 home runs and 13 more at-bats. So Chapman was obviously our best power hitter in the entirety of spring training. And he's got good contact with 60 contact lefty and then kind of mid-tier contact righties, but the power is where he excels. 77 power righty and 87 power lefty. And we've already seen that here in spring training. 43 plate vision, but I mean, you couldn't tell in spring training here. 4 walks to 7 strikeouts, which is not bad at all. So I liked what I saw from him, and he is going to be hopefully our star batter this year. I think it's going to be him, hopefully Ahmed Rosario, maybe potentially Leon or Riley Green, maybe. I'm not really sure, but I like what he brings us in. It'll be crucial to the team. So those are all the players that I wanted to focus on for the spring training highlights, and just go over, the guys who played the best, the guys that we brought in who I wanted to focus on and get some playing time for. But let's look at who we did not focus on. Who out of the guys that I didn't talk about were also involved in spring training and who played well? Well, one of them is Bryant Packer, 28 at-bats, 14 hits, and he batted .500. Dude, would you have thought this from a guy who has been mostly a AA player? I have not. And he batted with .571 slugging as well. Like, it's absurd. Some of these numbers are different than what I talked about because I forgot to save me simming 2 of the last 3 games on the season. So they might be a little bit different than what I brought up. But for the most part, the numbers that I talked about this episode were all fairly accurate. But he was pretty good. So he's a highlight. But he will not make the roster, unfortunately. There's just too many or too little spots for him to be on. But Kevin Plawecki, 31 at-bats, 10 hits, 323 average, slugging just below 400. I thought he was pretty solid when he got playing time, mostly against lefties. Actually, no, he played against both righties and lefties, so he definitely will get some playing time at catcher. And then we have Malloy right here, who also batted well when he got his chance, although he was one of the least used players here in spring training, batting .313. Slugging at .375, but on-base percentage at .450, so do a couple more walks. Steele Walker was one of the top highlights for me. 36 at-bats for him, batted .306, slugging similar to Plawecki and Malloy, so he was pretty good. Kerry Carpenter continued his good play from last season, batting .296, slugging above 600, so he will definitely be a starter to start the season. We talked about Leon. We talked a little bit about Yasmani Grandal, who ended up batting .282 and slugged over 500. Matt Vierling batted .277, slugging over 440. We talked about Matt Mervis and Dylan Dingler. Jonathan Scope was all right with a .241 average. Jose Iglesias, definitely not what I thought he would do with a .235 average, but I think he'll still be a very useful utility guy. So we'll get him plenty of playing time. Akil Baddoo, taking kind of a step back from where he ended off his year in year 1, only batting .224. Winslow Perez did not hardly get any at-bats, and when he did, he was only 1 for 5. Tom Murphy did not get a whole lot of action here, but he did bat .200, which is not very good. Ahmed Rosario, we talked about him. He batted .177, so that's a bit different of a number than I talked about. I think it was .210 when I was talking about him earlier, but it's actually going to be .177. Riley Green was surprisingly really bad, batting .169, and he pretty much played as much as he could because he was playing so poorly. I give him 71 at-bats, and again, an average worse than Rosario's, which is already really bad. So I hope that he can get back on track to where he was last year. Parker Meadows also struggled with a 167 average. We talked about Jace and we talked about Torkelson, whose average actually ends up at 95 with 1 game left in spring training. So several guys that I was hoping for more from did not perform as well, but a couple of guys really did surprise me. In terms of pitching, guys who I did not talk about include Spencer Turnbull, who was great as well in spring training with a 1.64 ERA and a 1.55 whip. So he had, a decently high whip, but he kept his ERA down. Erod had a bit of a struggle with ERA of 7.11 and a whip at 1.74. So that's not good. Schoolball was pretty solid. We talked about Tyler Mahle and Jackson Jobe. Rony Garcia had 12 innings of action and actually pitched pretty well. Joey Wentz was a bit below average, but that's all right. Will Vest had a small sample size with a 8.2 innings pitched, a 2.08 ERA in total. Jordan Hicks, 12.2 innings pitched, had a 1.42 ERA and a whip below 1. So I didn't focus on him for spring training, but he was solid out of the bullpen. So definitely looking forward to watching him actually play for the team. Otherwise, Bo Brisky had 8 innings pitched, did not pitch very well in that time. Alex Lang, same kind of a story. So not a whole lot to talk about here in terms of pitching that we haven't already discussed. And that's pretty much the spring training roundup. I think this was a good episode to get through and show some highlights, show some at-bats, and just go over some stats on how guys did. So without further ado, let's sim through this last game, and then with spring training over, we will set our roster right now. And so our active roster will look like this. We're going to have Tarek Skubal, Severino, Matt Chapman, Alex Lang, Ahmed Rosario, Tyler Mahle, Rosenthal, Turnbull, Scope, Jordan Hicks, Erod, Tom Murphy, Iglesias, Kerry Carpenter, Matt Whistler, Yasmani Grandal, Pedro Leon, Akil Baddoo, Riley Green, Matt Vierling, Brad Hand, Chad Kuhl, Matt Mervis, Torkelson, Rony Garcia, and Kevin Plawecki. So Joey Wentz, Jackson Jobe, and Jace Young will all be in AAA to start the season. Hoping for some good numbers from them. Will Vest will also start down here. I had to move somebody out of the lineup to make sure that Torkelson was on the Major League roster. So Will Vest was the casualty there. Steele Walker also will start in AAA. Dingler's down here as well. We've got Raul Lopez up here with Justin Brule and Larry Ladd because they have some good contact. The game definitely adjusted where I had a couple of players, so I might have to move some guys around perhaps, but that's all right. Kai Bush will start in AAA, or in AA rather, along with Wilmer Flores, Ty Madden, Julio Jimenez, Bryant Packard, and Chris Ramos, along with some other guys we drafted, like John Montez and Thomas Marlin. And we are going to keep Raul Pulido and Alonzo Gold down here in Class A until they get that contact up, because they both have very low batting ratings. So I want to get those up before they even get into AA action. But that's how we're going to rock with our minor league and major league teams. So we have pretty much a full organization, and I like the amount of diversity that we have in terms of the quality at different positions. So I like where we're at, and I will set our lineups and rotation real quick. Alright, so first the pitching rotation. Here's what it looks like to start year 2. Gonna have Luis Severino be the ace, obviously, followed by Tarek Skubal, Tyler Mahle, Spencer Turnbull, and Eduardo Rodriguez. Out of the bullpen, our 2 long relievers are Chad Kuhl and Rony Garcia. Then our 2 mid-relief pitchers are Jordan Hicks and Matt Whistler. We're going to have Alex Lang and Brad Hand play as the setup pitchers. And then Trevor Rosenthal will start the year as the closer. So against righties, here's what the lineup looks like. We're going to lead off with Jose Iglesias playing second base. Going to have Akil Baddoo playing right field. Kerry Carpenter at third, playing in left. Matt Chapman playing cleanup, obviously, followed by Mervis Rosario, Kevin Plawecki, Riley Green, Torkelson, and then Pedro Leon playing DH. Against lefties, Veerling will lead off and will play in right field in these games, followed by Riley Green in center field, Mervis Rosario batting third at shortstop, and Matt Chapman batting cleanup once again, followed by Scope playing second base, Iglesias DHing, Yasmani Grandal at catcher, Leon playing in left field, and Matt Mervis at first. So you're seeing that Tork and Mervis will split playing time at first base. Plawecki and Grandal will split playing time at catcher to start the year. Scope and Iglesias will split time at second base. And then Iglesias will also DH in some cases. And we're also going to have Leon DH as well. So guys who don't currently have playing time, it's pretty much just Tom Murphy. Otherwise, all the batters that we have will be out there at some point. So those are all the lineups, all the rotations, and we open the season against the Kansas City Royals. And it's going to be a home series to start the season against one of our interdivision rivals. So on opening day, next time out, it is Luis Severino facing off against Brady Singer. And I'll see you guys there. Thanks so much for watching Spring Training. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Take care and peace.